If you thought having personal information on the internet was bad enough, the bad guys are now using AI to accelerate what once took days into minutes through automated profiling. Digital reconnaissance just got a turbo boost. And it's bad news for anyone trying to protect people, assets, or infrastructure. We're going to talk about these issues and more on this episode of Today in Tech. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Joining me on the show today is Chris Wingfield. He is the Senior Vice President of Strategic Innovations at 360 Privacy. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thanks, Keith. Appreciate you having me on.
And then I'm going to say, if that's your real name, and we're going to get into that because you are one of the first people that really actually called themselves a tinfoil hat person.
Awesome.
Yeah. So let's talk briefly about what, you are at 360 Privacy, but before that, you were in the military doing a lot of this digital... What do you call it? Digital
targeting.
Digital targeting. So tell me a little bit about what you did for the military.
Yeah, former life, I was a digital targeter for the intelligence community. Started on the linguistic side of the house. I speak several languages. I then moved over to signals intelligence, so the exploitation of devices. I spent a lot of time overseas, around the world, doing tactical and strategic intelligence, working for the intelligence community. And then 3 years ago, I left to really just start working in the public sector.
And so are the tactics the same, or are they better in the military without giving any secrets away?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like the methods or methodology is the same, right?
Yeah.
If you can target somebody, around the world, you can target somebody here. Arguably, it's easier to target people within the United States because privacy laws, personally identifiable information, so easy to find. So arguably, with a credit card or just a free Google search, you can find the PII that you need.
All right, I want to set the table a little bit before we talk about a lot of the AI stuff that's now creeping into this. But I want to have you give a brief overview of open source intelligence, and sometimes people use the acronym OSINT. Do they call it OSINT?
OSINT.
OSINT. Yeah. Okay. Talk about what that process is, what is digital targeting, and then where would people go to find a lot of this information? Because obviously the internet's been around for 50, 60, 70 years now. Yeah, how long is it? The early days of ARPANET, but obviously it's been popularized, consumerized for about, I want to say 50 years now almost.
Yeah, 100%. And you look at like the data broker space, right? And that's really where a lot of this personally identifiable information comes from when you just do a Google search. Like OSINT is encompassing of a lot of things, right? People think of social media. Arguably a lot of people argue that the dark web is open source because really anybody can access it. You used to have a lot of special technology to get there. Now it's like just get a Tor browser extension on really whatever your current browser is, and you can get there. So it really encompasses a lot. The data broker space, though, looking towards 2032 has a valuation of $440 billion by then. So they're making a lot of money by selling your data. And when you look at the top data brokers, you're talking about the credit bureaus, and everybody here, listening more than likely is affected by a credit score, right? They're affected by that. So that data just proliferates from the top in like a B2B credentialized space like LexisNexis or TLO or Thomson Reuters Clear, moves down to, in a Google search, you might see a been verified or a White Pages or a Redaris report, which really has the same amount of data. It has your relatives, it has your phone numbers and physical addresses, whatever somebody would need to target you or your ecosystem. And
obviously, a lot of that information that was not on the internet before is probably now on the internet because as everybody digitized. So you would start thinking of, the old days, if you were a private investigator, for example, before the internet, you had to go and look for public sources and phone books and things like that. And that's all online now, right? So you could probably find information on anybody based on just internet stuff, right?
Yeah, not just probably. You absolutely could.
Yeah.
And you even talk about, we used to talk about, had to physically case a house to see like where's the doors, where's the windows, what's the layout of the house if I was to break in. Now I just go to Zillow.com or Realtor.com and there's pictures on YouTube, right? And I can just understand, I can do the casing digitally. So I always tell people, it's really just like one Google search from a digital threat to become a physical threat, if that's the intent of the threat actor.
Right. Well, Google Maps and Google Earth, like I can see the picture of my house.
That's right.
And I think the first time that I did that, it was one color, and then we painted the house. And I think that they've done this, and I live in a remote area, so I never thought that Google van was going to come by again. But apparently it did because, or they got it from the satellite. They got the new color now. So
yeah, 100%. I'm not saying that I knew that your house changed colors, Keith, but I might have.
Oh, did you? Yeah, I know. Before the show, we talked about how much you were going to dox me, but you're not actually going to.
I'm not.
Not on the show. Real estate interior photos. So if we we're going to sell our house, we would have probably had someone come in and take photos, and that would have been on the real estate site, right?
100%. Like arguably, like when you're about to sell a home or purchase a home, like get in the contract agreement that the agent's going to take that down through MLS. Because if they can take it down, that's going to actually proliferate and take it down from realtor.com, Zillow.com, all of those downstream.
Yeah.
And then you really just have the YouTube videos or things like that where you can reach out to the actual creator. But recently I was targeting like a very well-known celebrity, and they had done something with.
Now, when you say targeting, you mean in a good way, right?
In a good way, that's right. Yeah, to show them kind of like what is your digital footprint, like what do you actually look like, and they had done some interviews in the interior of their home. They had redone their closet, right? So what I told them was like, you own an old house in this city. Windows used to be different sizes, doors used to be different sizes. It's very indicative of an old property. You probably changed all of the interior, like the facade, but like, did you move where the HVAC is? Did you swap out the windows? The answer is no. So, just from looking at this video that they made on the interior of their home, I'm able to then go do one Google search to find the address, go to Zillow.com, compare the window in the closet, and it's like, yeah, it's painted a different color, but it's still you. So.
Right. Now, in general, I want to talk about that there are good reasons why people should use OSINT techniques and for what purposes. But, obviously private investigators, military nation states, they're doing it.
Right.
Obviously, I'm talking about some of the bad guy areas. Hackers and scammers use it, but is there a good guy function? So give me some examples of where it's being used for good. I guess good.
Good. Yeah. What's operational definition of good and bad? I would say, if you really want to understand your digital footprint, like if I want to have adversarial strategy to how I'm targeting someone, but I'm acting as a good guy, but my thought process is how a threat actor would do it, then I can help identify, hey, these are places where you're vulnerable, or places that we could actually make you a harder target by removing this information, understanding your social media settings, understanding your recovery methods for your accounts, how Google contributions might actually just be leaving digital breadcrumbs of you everywhere you go, looking at your corporate bios. Like, do you mention that you're married, you have a spouse or partner, you have kids? Do you mention where you live and what you do? All of these things nefarious actors could take and utilize in a negative way, but there are a lot of, quote unquote, good guys out there that are looking at that data to say, hey, this is where you could be exploited. Let's create a tangible solution here so that you're not exploited for that down the road.
Right. And and obviously there are, some of the roles of people that do this too, law enforcement investigations. Obviously, if you're a good guy looking to get a bad guy, you would use these techniques, right?
100%. I mean, even realtors, right? Like they may have access to a LexisNexis or some type of credential data set to know who's showing up to the house, who am I showing the house to, things of that nature. So, there are a lot of different use cases for even the credentialized data sets.
I'm going to say something about journalism because I am a journalist. I guess I'm still a journalist. Investigative reporting, things like that. Corporate security and risk management. That's interesting. Like insider threat detection. I think we had an episode a couple of weeks ago about whether employees are spying on you. And the guy on that show was talking about, basically using a lot of these techniques. So I guess the point that I think you want to make is that it's not just hackers trying to get your information, but more like how other people can use this in a beneficial way, right?
That's right. 100%. And like, of course, there are the hackers and the scammers doing that. Like we all remember the email that most people got like a couple months ago saying, hey, like I installed something on your device, you need to pay me $2,000 in crypto, things of that nature. But, they had added a personal address, a phone number, a city.
I do remember that.
Yep. And pictures of the house, right? And so it's like, people can take how widely available this data is and then just send out blast emails and, at $2,000 a pop. Like if you get several respondents, I mean, that's pretty easy. So
I can't remember if I got one of those, but I was reading about a lot of those.
It's interesting because like really it goes back to like the 2017, 2018 time frame. Like they started doing that, but there really wasn't the personally identifiable information piece. And that's what really escalates the human emotion, right? You have a visceral reaction of, oh, I see my Google Street View of my home. I see my physical address, my phone number. Like all of a sudden you think it's legit and you're embarrassed. So you don't want to talk to people about it. So you pay the $2,000 in crypto when really, what I tell clients, what I tell people is just take something in there that seems weird and just search that sentence on Google. And a lot of times you're going to see, hey, this was, reported as a scam. Right. So it's more of like an enablement, empowerment of people that get those.
All right. So let's talk about now how generative AI, and that's one area where I think generative AI is helping some of the bad guys get past some of these other hurdles that used to be, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. And, when you talk about Anthropic or Claude, they put out an article in April. They were looking at the month of March, how, threat actors had utilized Claude for nefarious purposes. And one of those was a low technical person who really didn't have a lot of technical proficiency was using Claude to help create malware, right? And so what it's doing is it's helping flatten that curve between an extremely technical person and a non-technical person where you could really become dangerous. And I think I'd like to say on this podcast that, the good guys can use it the same way, right? I think we look at it like this is a dystopian idea that AI is taking over the world and AI is doing, et cetera. But if good guys, quote unquote, could utilize it the same way and kind of red team their, tech stacks, red team how they think about processes, they could look at it, hey, this is what an adversary has access to, even if they're a non-technical person. So like, let's build our defense to that. I was working with a company once and they're like, hey, I have 3,000 VoIP numbers I want you to look at and see if you can identify. And I was like, well, let's just look at like the root cause. Like, what's the problem here? Like, and they're like, well, they're using VoIP numbers to apply for these financial loans. And I said, okay, well, if you stop allowing VoIP numbers, you could just plug into an API that says, hey, this is a VoIP number. And then they'd have to provide a legitimate phone number. So it's the same thing, like understanding what adversaries have access to, you can actually build a much better proactive offensive and defensive plan.
Right. Okay. But in addition to that, like the AI is obviously faster.
100%.
I think when generative AI first came out, we all knew that it was going to make sentences correct. Like the easiest way to tell if you were being phished or spam message was the sentence was wrong and
That's right.
It didn't make any grammatical sense, but like they're fixing all of that.
Yeah.
So, but they're going a step further now, right? Like they're adding actual personal details. Like you said, they can grab photos of my house or they can say, oh yeah, you work here, or, so they can do all of that information and then craft it into an email that might trick me.
That's right. So like I look at it like this, Keith, like you used to be, you'd hire a private investigator like you talked about before to go case somebody's house or follow somebody and say, hey, this is what they're doing, yada, yada. Then you really moved into probably the early 2000s when I'd say the data broker industry really, really started booming with companies like Axiom, LexisNexis, and things of that nature. Then you could just go to a site. You could be credentialed on the business side, or you could just wait till it kind of trickles down to a Google search. Well, now you can, instead of like, if you're a non-technical person, you don't know how to Google dork or, have good Google search syntax, right? I could just go and use some of these models, and we'll kind of talk about each model and how they present PII. But at the end of the day, they can take my technical level even higher to where I can let it do the work for me. Maybe it takes 6 minutes, 7 minutes, and it comes back with a report. And that's enough of a pivot point for that digital threat to become physical with a lot faster, put together than I could have done myself.
Right. And then it's also, like what else is AI doing that wasn't happening before? Because again, all of this stuff has been on the internet before generative AI came out. So you could do all of this stuff before, but 100%. It would just take maybe hours or days, right?
Yeah. So
and now you could just, is it almost like you could just ask the generative AI to do this for you? Are we starting to see it get into the AI agentic space as well? And like you're assigning little agents to do all this stuff for you?
Yeah, agentic AI it's a really interesting space, right? You start looking at like Langflow and actually having, almost like this intent elicitor agent that has like a middle management agent that's actually making all of these micro tools work. But when we talk about each of the models, I think it matters about how they were trained and how they present PII, right? So Claude or Anthropic, it was trained called constitutional AI. So it's not necessarily like, is this good or is this bad? It was good because of this. So they actually have ethically trained principles, right? When you look at chat, it's more of that reinforcement learning through human feedback. So it's like, it's good or it's bad, right? And then through that feedback, it learns. When you start looking like XAI or Grok, their whole purpose is to be, less filtered, less censored. We really just want to be like a single pane of glass for if you can find it on Google or you can find it on a search engine, we're going to present you that data. So each model is going to be different, but context and intent, how you provide that to an agent really matters, because you may be able to get around some of the filters. Like Claude is very like, we talked about it before, like Brienne of Tarth from Game of Thrones. Like this is my ethical code. I will stand by it no matter what. Chat, there's ways that you can kind of get around some of it, but it still does a really good job. Whereas Grok is like really a good spot to just jump and say, hey, like I'm going to target myself. Like, it started downloading, the webinars that I've been on to look for any type of essential elements of information or PII. So understanding what models and then understanding how you prompt, like there really is an art to prompting. I think people think like you can just log into ChatGPT or use the free version and say, find Keith Shaw or find Chris Wingfield. But, it doesn't work like that. You really have to understand the context, because, we had a research team that went through and we actually were able to get a model to, write malware, but we didn't go on there and say, we're trying to write malware, help us out, or this is a red team exercise. What we did is we just said, hey, we're a sysadmin. This is how we have it set up, yada, yada. Like, how would you do X, Y, or Z? And then it was able to present that. So The beauty of that, though, is if you can learn how to prompt, then it makes you a harder target because
Right.
you'll be able to identify those vulnerabilities.
When you're using this process of OSINT and data targeting and things like that, are most of the professionals are probably using all three or even more
100%.
AI systems, right? So I think maybe doing it yourself, you're just thinking that I'll just do this on ChatGPT, but you got to think about the other two, right?
100%. And you even look at, there's companies like, Perplexity AI, which has like some of their own models that have come in, but really you can choose a model. Like I want you to use Grok, or I want you to use Chat, or I want you to use Claude, et cetera. And so that kind of becomes like almost a conglomerate, and you can just set it to pick the best model for this type of prompt, right? Because even when you get on Chat, it's not like there's just Chat GPT, right? There's a lot of different models,
Yeah.
and same with Claude, and same with Grok. Really they're at Grok 3 now. So it's like important to understand that there are different models that may be better at things like advanced reasoning or arithmetic or coding, right? Like there's a lot of different ways to use different models.
Right.
So there is some complexity to it.
But in this case, I mean, are they looking for accurate results, or are you just looking for confirmation that if you're looking for a person, I guess,
Yeah.
you want to make sure that whatever it tells you is the correct address,
100%.
right? So it's accuracy
So-
versus other things.
I think the way that I look at it is I actually use it as almost an initial step. I say, hey, I'm interested in like Keith Shaw. This are some links that I know about him. Like, can you just build out a dossier on this individual? I'm going on the podcast. Like, I'd like to know more, et cetera, right? And, it depends on how you frame it in the context. But at that point, like it will provide you, because I talk about the power of the pivot a lot. And that's kind of where the methodology really matters. Like you were trained to look at this data point or this phone number and address, and you have a feeling that, hey, this address matters. Let's go confirm that, right? With AI, like I can at least start that initial process and say, here's a possible address, here's white pages, here's been verified, yada, yada. And then I can actually go and like confirm that through deeds and records. So really it's like, let's kind of take that lower level, that initial work off my plate. Then I can spend 5 minutes doing very deep targeting on different, dark web breach forms, things of that nature.
Yeah.
And then it's like it just expedited the entire process.
What I remember when generative AI first came out, when ChatGPT announced, the first public kind of, offering, that was like November 2022, right? It was late 2022, and I remember using it initially, and I said, "Hey, tell me who Keith Shaw is," and it was awful. It had no idea who I was. I can guarantee you that if I did that now, it would know a lot more about me, right?
100%.
Based on the training. And probably you did it. I mean, you probably already did this where you were able to find things about me.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I'm also a subscriber
Yeah.
to ChatGPT. What impresses me about that, and it's also super scary, is that it knows all of my chats that I've had with it. And so I'm actually volunteering more information about myself because it knows what I've been asking it, and sometimes I have it draw pictures of what it thinks I look like, or I upload a picture of me, and it knows all of this stuff. And it was weird because I was doing the stupid baby thing the other day. I don't know if you've seen this trend
Yeah.
where you ask ChatGPT I uploaded a photo of myself and said, draw this as if it was a baby. And I don't say me because for some reason the guardrail still exists where it can't put a photo into another photo.
That's right.
But so it drew the thing, but it also drew the back of my laptop, because that was the photo I gave it, was from one of my podcasts. So then I had to do it again as a 10-year-old. And it did it, but it was super, super specific. It mentioned shows that I've done, like other shows that I have. And I never told it to put that sticker on the thing. It knew from its memory that I'd host a show called Global Tech Tales, and it put a little Global Tech Tales sticker on it.
Interesting.
Like that freaked me out.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's important too to talk about like you have the training data, right? Like if you look at Claude, like I asked Claude something this morning, it said, I can't tell you this specifically based on my training data because the training data I'm done with right now is from October 2024. But once it started introducing that it can start doing Google searches for you or search engine results for you,
Right.
That's where it can really start pulling in essential elements of information. It's like what we talked about, like what you talk about on your podcast or your webinars, and same for me. A lot of these models are able, if those transcripts are public, they can just start perusing that. When I target myself, like, did Chris ever mention that he lives here? Things of that nature. So, I tell people a lot of times, and I know we'll talk about it later, but when you talk about social media and the things of like, how can I control my social media, things of that nature, a lot of it is like understanding what your search engine visibility looks like, what those pivot points are that AI is using, and then how can you really empower yourself to take back those pivot points? So if an adversary utilizes that, you're in a better security posture.
Yeah, and so let's talk about then what companies can do, and then we can talk about individuals. What can they do to start combating this AI enabled OSINT process? As it obviously we want to have companies that can protect their own people, but their own data too, right?
Yeah, 100%. So I think there's a lot to it, but it gets back to like what data is available through a search engine, and then what of that is coming through AI, and what of that can you take care of. So I'll give you an example. Something comes through for Been Verified or White Pages, that's on Google. Google has programs, right? Google results about you, or you can, if you're signed in, you click the 3 dots and you say remove these results, or they have a contact form you can fill out and say, hey, I don't want this PII from these people search sites on Google searches, and they're gone. So that helps with that piece. Obviously, you can remove from the root as well, remove them from the actual people search sites. But if you can just look at what is coming up on search engines, that's going to help a lot.
Yeah.
Now, if something's coming through, like you have an LLC and you are the registered agent, and you used your home address for that LLC, Google's not going to remove that because that is public record on Open Corporates or Bizopedia or like whatever the state website is.
Yeah.
However, that's where you can say, okay, well, I'm going to go change the registered agent. I'm going to go change that address, and then I'm going to have Google re-index that so those results aren't coming through. So a lot of that, and then if it's SEC filings, like those are going to live on Google, right? SEC.gov, Google's not going to remove that. And really what it comes down is like that's part of your baseline of like your risk assessment or your risk-based score. And so really it's understanding, hey, what are the pivot points? What do I look like on search engines? Because what I tell clients at the end of the day, like a low-level threat actor, mid-level, senior, it doesn't matter. They're all more than likely going to start with a search engine. Now we've seen a rise in every like search engine, Wikipedia, all of these are starting to go downward trend in use, and ChatGPT is going upward, right? Because if you can do the Google searches,
right,
if I don't have to know all of this Boolean syntax, and I can just let chat do it for me, that's going to be a lot easier, right? So I think we're going to start seeing that relationship where people are going to start using these AI models. You used to have to pay for a LexisNexis credentialing, then you had to pay for Been Verified or White Pages or any people search site, membership, and now it's like, hey, if I can get those search results quicker through like a free ChatGPT or Grok or Claude, not as much,
right, then
I'm just going to start there. So again, really to protect people at the business level, because protecting your people does protect the business at the end of the day.
Right.
I would say for especially their physical security teams or even their cybersecurity teams, looking at, hey, what does their digital footprint look like from a threat perspective? What is their risk? Are they a face of the company, right? Are they somebody that somebody may show up at the headquarters asking for, et cetera? And then making sure that you can take down as many of those pivots that you identify in that cycle.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of people even realize that they can have this information taken off of Google, of some of these other sites? Because it feels like there's an attitude of, well, it's out there on the internet, right, so I'm screwed.
There's the number one thing I hear all the time, Keith, is it's public record. Like, what can I do? And the answer is you can do a lot, right?
Yeah.
And we'll probably talk about the dark web as well. And it's like people say, well, it's out there, so like, what am I going to do? And so I tell people like, you can delete a lot of things, and then the other things just knowing is situational awareness, and situational awareness will help you devalue that. So when I say that, it's like the National Public Data Breach in August. 272 million unique social security numbers. And people are like, well, it's all my PII.
It's
and
all over now.
I'm like, yeah, but let's go there. Say this is one large CSV, right? Like we all know you have to clean it up and there's a lot to that. But at the end of the day, like if you freeze your credit, that is really going to help create, a security posture around you. And then I had clients that are like, well, I'm in real estate, I buy real estate, et cetera, et cetera. I can't freeze my credit. No problem. Let's talk about a fraud alert, right? You go to Experian, you don't even have to log in and ask some questions, and then that will actually expand to all of the bureaus. So honestly, Keith, what I tell clients and I tell people in the space is like there's this inverse relationship between like the education of how to be safe in the digital space and like our access to things that are digital, right? Like we use phones, we connect to Wi-Fi, we do all of these things, but we don't truly understand like we're giving away this PII. When we click accept terms and conditions, privacy policy, they're selling that data downstream. Right. So it's really just about enabling people and empowering them to understand they can be owners of their data.
But a lot of these methods that are that you're suggesting to remove yourself from some of these things, it feels like just you telling me this. I was like, oh, this just sounds so hard. This, it's like I got to go to this site and tell them to take it off. I've got to go look for the 3 hamburger buttons, and and I'm sure that Google, and then you start talking about social media sites, they bury that information deep within their site in terms of removing personal data, right? Because that's their moneymaker.
Yeah, no, 100%.
And so dedicated people that really want to get, or you hire someone like you and, and you can then do that for them.
Yeah.
But, it's so hard. Do you think maybe that people could start using agents or start building agents. And I'm just going to have my agent do all this. Like, go out, get rid of my name off of these following sites. I still have to probably do some programming, but do you think we're going to get into a world where maybe that happens?
100%. So when I look at like strategic innovation from a product perspective, I always look at it from you start manual, you make something that can be replicated, you go to semi-automatic, and then my goal from a product perspective is if we can manually do it at the same quality of result, let's just automate that. So in my opinion, right now, I look at AI and I say, okay, find all of the publicly available links to these people search sites or data brokers that you can on search engines, and it brings those up. And then that's a good place to start, Keith, right? Because like, you know, maybe there's hundreds or thousands of data brokers, but you know, if on Google, there's only 10 that are coming up for you or your family, you go remove from those 10 and that's a much lighter load, right? And maybe you do that search once a week. Now, Google has the Google Results About You program, which is through a Gmail that you own. You upload 3 variations of your name, 3 addresses, 3 phone numbers, 3 emails, and on a 24-hour cadence, it goes out, looks for what's indexed, says this is indexed. Do you want it removed? You say yes, and it kind of takes that. Now, it doesn't remove it from the source,
right?
But now you have those links to say, oh, if I want to go remove that from the source, I'll do 5 of these a day, or I'll do 10 of these a day. So, you know, there's ways to whittle down, but I agree with you as far as like, I don't think people realize that how much information's out there. And then when they do realize it, they feel like it's such a burden. They're just like, I don't think I can do anything about it.
Right. So we are here to say that you can do something about
100%.
it at some point. And maybe down the road, it'll be even a lot easier to do things like this.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you look a lot of the legislations for privacy is falling behind because you look at data broker ecosystem that's supposed to be $440 billion in 2032.
Right.
Like you're really messing with some cash at that point, right? And you've even seen the last couple of weeks, some of the laws or policies that we're looking at being, you know, implemented have been canceled, right? Because at the end of the day, like this is a machine. And the same with AI, like legislating something that's completely revolutionizing and evolving so quickly, like you'll never have legislation that truly matches. So the best way is to enable and empower people to understand what type of data do I have exposed, and then what are my options for that.
Right. And so I want to bring up another thing that we talked about before the show, which is we're I don't know, I'm calling it data poisoning. You know, it's just this cool concept of where you're almost taking an offensive approach rather
100%.
than playing defense. You're now playing offense, and you're telling some of these social media sites, you're giving them fake information. And that's something that's okay, right?
Yeah, no, I mean 100%.
So give me an example of what you do.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. So like think about if you have a LinkedIn profile, and on LinkedIn, you instead of putting like the city and state where your headquarters is, you actually put the town and state where you currently live. Well, you know, if you have a unique enough name or the town's small enough, and I just do first name, last name, city, state, home address. Yeah, Keith. Yeah, that's right. You know, it's really easy to identify, okay, these are people's search sites or data brokers. I'm one Google search away finding your address. And then now I can see pictures of your home, things of that nature, right? So, you know, when you look at LinkedIn as a social media site that needs to be public, right? Because you want your public persona out there, just thinking about like, hey, like, what am I showing people? People have their date of birth on their contact information on LinkedIn. Like, you don't need that, because then I can go and that'll help me whittle down. If you don't have a very descriptive name, I can just search for your name, that city, state, and then that date of birth, right? If you go through experience, people will say maybe at the top of their LinkedIn, they're like, I'm going to be smart and I'm just going to put United States. Well, then in their experience, they have, you know, Needham, Massachusetts, or, you know, something of that nature. Right. So at the end of the day, it's understanding what you're putting out there really matters. I go back to Google contributions, right? Public contributions are operationally defined as public, meaning they're there forever. You know, I've had people that had hundreds of contributions. I had an individual the other day had posted 127 photos on Google reviews in the last 10 years, 487,000 views. If just one of those people had a nefarious, you know, thought, they could identify, hey, in the last 12 years, you've been here, 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 and here. And most of the reviews were within, you know, 3 to 5 miles of the current residence. Mm-hmm. So it's more about, if you're already putting things out there proactively, let's take care of that. And then now I can do proactive breadcrumbs, is what I call it. Like, yeah, you can make
this is my favorite part.
You can make your social media, you know, private, right? But like, if you have to have a public persona like you, right, it's important. Just understanding like, hey, you can actually help mess up some algorithms, right? Like, you can change your LinkedIn URL. And that really hurts a lot of like these business to business type websites that are selling your contact information, because LinkedIn and a lot of those sites have been scraped so many times that they have that information. But if you change it, it breaks that link. And then they're going to start trying to connect new data on that LinkedIn URL. So small changes like that. Don't put your middle initial on LinkedIn, right? There's just like little things like that that people don't think about.
Yeah, I should check to see if my middle initial. So this is why it feels counterintuitive, because sites like Facebook and LinkedIn. Let's just use those two as an example. They were trying to promote everybody, put as much information as you want, because we want to be able to easier find you so that your friends can find you and you can share games, or from a LinkedIn perspective, like put as much out there so that you can get a new job down the road or anything like that. So it seems counterintuitive to start taking all of this stuff off. On Facebook, I think I used to click on like what movies I liked, what TV shows I liked. And then I realized, well, why do they need to know this other than selling me ads and stuff like that? So I did start taking most of that information off. And I try to be as private as I can, but I still get I'm probably still more public out there on Facebook than I want to be. But on LinkedIn, like if I want to get a job, like shouldn't I fill out my profile? And, am I going to get dinged from a potential employer perspective because I don't have a complete profile on LinkedIn?
So I'd say like build out your profile 100%, but look at like these, what I would consider non-essential elements of information, like what current city you live in or where, like your past experience matters, but does it matter that you lived in Boston or, you know what I mean? So like at the end of the day, like if you work for this company, you still have that 20 years of experience, arbitrary number. But if you didn't put Boston, like it doesn't hurt you. So it's like looking at your social media as like, what is a non-essential element of information here? People upload their resume to LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
And there's things like, yes, people could view that in a non-nefarious way, or they could look at it in a nefarious way because most people at the top of their resume have maybe their address, their phone number, maybe their email. So again, it's like, send your resume to the people that need it, or, keep your social media private. So then when people, because you don't know who's using or looking at your social media. I have clients that say, hey, I don't use my social media. I'm like, yeah, but your Facebook is still active. You may not have posted anything in 6 years.
Right.
But when you were posting, I have pictures of you and your kids. I have pictures of your house, right? People take pictures near their homes so you can see houses in the background. If you can see houses in the background, I can help identify from, Google satellite imagery or Google Street View that this is your current property.
But you're not recommending that people delete their social media accounts altogether.
No, not at all. Because, at the end of the day, a lot of people make money off of social media. And it's more about, there is this convergence, right? This term you hear in the space, this convergence of convenience and security. And there are actually a lot of things you can do that are convenient that will improve your security posture. Because what I typically see is once something becomes inconvenient, then security goes out the window. So it's more about just educating yourself on like, what is multi-factor authentication and why do people keep talking about it, right? Like, why should I have my Facebook profile private versus like, what could a nefarious actor see? And I think it goes back to your earlier question of like, do people realize how much information's out there? And then do they realize how a nefarious actor would do or utilize that information? Because they don't think like that. They would never do that.
Right. So are there other ethical boundaries when you're talking about the OSINT process? Is it legal versus ethical versus dangerous? Do you think that we're going to start getting future laws at some point? I mean, maybe in Europe, because they seem to be more about privacy than we are here in the US, or is it still pretty much the Wild West? Anything goes?
I mean, honestly, it's turned into the Wild West. Like I said, it's easier to target people, in my opinion, like within, especially the United States because of the privacy policy, than it is to target somebody because of GDPR in the UK or over in Europe. But at the end of the day, like I think you get into like, what is the operational definition of like ethical, right? Or legal? Because at the end of the day, like, can I get all of this information from someone on a Google search? It's like, yes. But I think it comes down to intent versus outcome, right? Like, what was your intent getting the information? Like, okay, this person coaches somebody's kid in baseball and they want to know like, hey, do I feel safe with my kids around this as the new coach at the high school or something of that nature? It's like, what was your intent? Taking care of the kid. What was the outcome? You kept it internal. It was just to better understand like who that person was. Like some people may say that's not ethical. And then some people may say, hey, like I just wanted to better take care of my child. So I think there's a real like, intent versus outcome there, because you may have the best intent that creates a terrible outcome for somebody else. And like, is that ethical? And so, I think it's a moral compass like decision.
Have you ever found some embarrassing information off of someone and then you have to decide whether to tell that person or 100%. That I mean, I guess if I was working with you, would I sign a release that like anything you find can be used against me, I guess? Yeah. But if I'm looking to get rid of it, right?
100%. So the way I look at it, like you think about some of the breaches that have happened, right? Like in the past, like Ashley Madison was a breach that happened, right?
Great example.
And that created some friction.
You didn't find my
people.
name on there, did you?
I did not find your name on there, Keith. Great job. But when I am, through my work with different people, like you do have people that show up on that breach. But at the end of the day, what I'm presenting to them is like, hey, this is the PII that I've found. that we need to change. It doesn't matter necessarily where it came from, because if this is your password and you're still using it anywhere in your ecosystem, let's change it.
Yeah.
If this is your credit card and you're still using it, let's cancel it. If this is your social, let's freeze your credit.
Right.
So what I focus on is what can we devalue from that, less so on like, hey, we found you in the Ashley Madison breach, or we found you on meet up with people, etc. Right. Because at the end of the day, it's all about protecting the person, not necessarily embarrassing them or trying to bring up, things from their past that really don't matter and don't work towards that tangible solution.
All right. I know we mentioned the dark web, and we haven't really talked about it. So, the stuff that we were talking about where you can be proactive and go on the offense. With dark web, is it still too hard if your information is on the dark web, whether it's through a breach or, you mentioned social security numbers, what can you do then? Is there anything that you can do, or do you just have to change everything that about you?
I actually have the same kind of offensive playbook for the dark web that I do with the open web and with social media, right? With social media, I'm here putting, hey, I live in New York City. Like, is that true? Or did I choose that because there's just a huge population there? So identifying if I live there or not is going to take a lot of time, right? It's the same with the dark web. I understand that I trusted an application with my information. That information was breached or leaked, and it wasn't my fault. But what could I have done? Could I have controlled the information that I gave, right? So think about information that comes out in breaches, like, hey, here's a phone number. Maybe use a VoIP number, right? Like use Burner or use Twilio or something of that nature, right? This is an email. It's like, think about just hide my email with iCloud, or, Proton Mail, like has all of the aliases, like any alias email you use, because then if it's out there, it's out there. Think about credit cards. Like there's privacy.com. You can have all of these virtual credit cards. So all of a sudden it's like the data that gets out there, I've devalued it before it gets out there. And then when it gets out there, a lot easier to change a VoIP number or some type of credit card that's virtual than it is to actually go and actually cancel a legitimate credit card, get a new credit card, things of that nature. Social security is tough because if you have to, you think about the AT&T breach, like they were using that for some type of background investigation, and then that company is what got breached.
Right.
At the end of the day, like they had to run that search on you, but how do you devalue? Freeze your credit, right? And people don't know what a credit freeze is. They think it's extremely tough. It's going to take a lot of time. And so a lot of times I'm just guiding people through, like, it's actually not that hard. It's actually a lot easier than you think. And
if you can get by the layers and layers of, are you sure you pay for a subscription and get all the stuff, actually freezing it is free, but then they also push
it depends on if you want to go through like a service arm, or if you just want to reach out directly to the credit bureaus, which is what I tell clients to do, because you can reach out, you create an account, you freeze. And if you want to unfreeze, you literally just go toggle it off. It unfreezes within a certain amount of time. You refreeze, and they're required by law to freeze it, within a certain amount of time. Now, do I wish that there was something in place that that was just the norm, that we were brought into a credit system and the credit system just better protected the people? Yeah, I do. We're not there right now, but I hope in the future that that's something that'll happen.
Yeah, one of the things that happened with me on a lot of the data breaches was old accounts. Again, this is probably over the last 20 years. I remember signing up for some goofy photo thing. And then it got breached, and I haven't used that service in 20 years.
Yeah,
getting my name off of that is pretty much impossible, right? If it was in a breach.
Yeah. So the way that I deal with the dark web is that, as I tell people that if I'm going to reach out to a threat actor, say it was a small breach, it actually is just some individual posting on a forum, and that's them. All of a sudden, you're engaging with a nefarious actor. You don't know who they are. You don't know their intentions. More often than not, you reach out. You pay the money or whatever, they still post it, or they say they deleted it, and then they sell it regardless, right? So your information at that point has become a commodity. I think about the National Public Data breach. If it's posted on breach forums, thousands of people have downloaded it, that information is out there. So really the way I look at it is understanding what's on the dark web is situational awareness. Because I hear people say on the open website, it's public record, what am I going to do? There's ways to take care of that. It's hey, on the dark website, it's out there. What are you going to do? It's devalue everything that you can. But if you don't know what's out there, if I'm going through that list of 272 million social security numbers and I click one and I try to do some type of identity theft on that individual and their credit's frozen and it stops me, it's okay, discard, next one. So it's you don't want to be the next one that doesn't have any of that in place. And to have that in place, you need to understand what your exposures are.
All right. Chris Wingfield, again, great stuff. Thanks for joining us on the show today.
Absolutely.
You've energized me and terrified me at the same time. So
I get that a lot.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Keith.
That's all the time we have for this week's show. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, add any thoughts you have below. Join us every week for new episodes of Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Thanks for watching.